and welcome to 3 Things You Should Know About Financial Planning. I'm Gabby Luoma, CPA, CGMA, and CEO of Mod Ventures. I'll be facilitating and joining in this discussion with Robert Horstman, a certified financial planner who specializes in comprehensive financial planning. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Mod Ventures. Mod Ventures is an outsourced accounting and advisory company for businesses across the United States. Our accounting team is entirely virtual and has been since 2014. Our passion is to help entrepreneurs organize, create, and predict their financial futures. We believe that strong small businesses create financially stable communities. Thanks, Robert, so much for joining me today to discuss financial planning and why it's so important to our lives.
No, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great. So when we started, discussing like financial planning and tax planning and all those different things, I thought, man, I need to get Robert on our YouTube channel to give us a little bit of basics on financial planning and what that looks like and why that's important. So I'm so glad that you can join us today to talk about all of those things. And why don't you give us a little bit of background of who you are and just kind of your resume.
Sure. So thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here. So I am a certified financial planner currently with Lincoln Investment. Our company is actually based out of Pennsylvania, but our regional office is in Tempe, Arizona. But I have clients. We're kind of a national company, so I have clients all over the United States at this point. So,
yeah, just like us.
Yeah. So I do end up doing a lot of virtual stuff. I travel a lot, and I'm pretty flexible, but we do leverage a lot of technology just to get stuff done when we need to.
Absolutely.
So we're in Tempe now, but I'm actually originally from Northern Virginia. So I was born and raised in Northern Virginia. I went to college in Virginia, and then I worked predominantly most of my career there through different financial companies in the industry. And when I made the switch, primarily I made the switch to Lincoln Investment for the open architecture. I worked at a lot of big companies and kind of cut my teeth in the industry at a lot of different places to see different sides of the industry. But I wanted to take that knowledge and really apply it on a open architecture basis. And being an independent financial planner, I can talk more about it, but having the freedom to work with multiple different companies and investment companies and providers
is that what that means
for my clients.
Is that what it means in open architecture, is that you have more options available to you?
Yeah, because there's multiple different positions, and I would say the financial industry likes to be confusing with jargon.
Yeah. So do CPAs. Yeah.
So a lot of it is just companies like predominantly a lot of the industry is what's called like a captive financial advisor, or they're like a career financial advisor. So if you work with XYZ company, you just end up being, and every company has their own things that are fantastic and great. But if you work with one company, a lot of times you end up being a little bit more, I call it like bowling with the bumpers up. Like you can do a lot of things within those lines, but you have to stay limited to like the proprietary stuff or investments or vehicles or processes that the companies use. So you can still get a lot done, but I liked being an independent financial planner just because it completely removes the bumpers. So we can really sit down on sit on the same side of the table as the clients and say, hey, I'm like a fiduciary advisor, meaning we're kind of bound and we operate on whatever's in your best interest. But when we get to understand their situation and their goals and objectives better, we can literally sit down and say, okay, here's your plan, here's your goals, here's your objectives, here's what you want to do for yourself or your family or business. And then we can go shop the market and say, okay, I think we should use this company for this, or we should use this company for this. So we can coordinate all that stuff a lot easier too, which a lot of clients find helpful,
Yeah,
just for efficiency.
that's
Um,
awesome. You're a certified financial planner, and so that's a certification that you have to take. And then you have to keep up certain educational requirements as well, right? That's
yeah, it's very exciting. All the hours of CE that we have to do.
yes.
But yeah, I would say that's important too. So not that it is the end all be all, but the again in the industry, there's so many different titles. But the CFP is one thing that I would say separates a lot of advisors from the pack, I would say.
Yeah.
Because if you work at different companies, it'll be like the VP of this, or financial advisor, or financial planner, or whole like wealth management, or all those titles, or whatever the company is basically approved to do. But nobody can say certified financial planner unless they hold that designation. And
Yeah.
I would say it does separate and add a layer of expertise for the professional that you're working with.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you for explaining that to us. So when we were discussing, what we were going to talk about, the big picture thing that I always like to do is get down to why is financial planning important to us as individuals or business owners. Why is it important? So
Sure.
yeah.
So I would say the planning is important because it's easy to get distracted with different siloed pieces of the puzzle, I call it. So there's so many different things with planning. So like for an individual, it would be there's investments, but then there's retirement planning, then there's income distribution planning, then there's taxes, and there's estate planning. And it's easy to kind of piece those things together over your lifetime. But
Mhm.
then unless you have a plan, all of those things may not coordinate appropriately. So like you just end up acquiring stuff over time. It's like, hey, I heard we should do this, so let's do this.
Yeah.
My friend or family or whoever coworker was like, this is a good idea, so we did a little bit of that, and
Yeah.
then you end up a lot of times when I work with clients, I would say predominantly a lot of clients are interested in doing it, the planning when they're within that 5 to 10 years of retirement, which we call like the retirement red zone for
Mhm.
our football fans out there.
Yeah.
Because then you start looking at it when you start, it's, hey, I just need to get started and I need to save. That's pretty easy. Yeah, I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's kind of the baby steps, I would say. But as your account starts growing and you start looking at it and you're like, hey, time flies. I'm like 5, 10 years away from retirement, and I have a bunch of stuff that I've acquired over the years, but I have no idea. Like, do I have enough? Like, do I have
Right.
the right stuff? How do I use it? What do I take from first? Like, am I taking advantage of all the stuff that I should be doing? And
Mhm.
that's where I would say the planning is very helpful, because it pulls all those things together so that you have synergy within all the different pieces of the puzzle, so that they all coordinate appropriately.
Right. Which is so important. I mean, you mentioned retirement, and certainly that's when people start thinking about this, right? They've been, like you said, accumulating wealth. But I mean, my daughter she's gonna be 20. She's only 19, and she's like, Mom, I'm gonna get an IRA and I'm gonna start putting money into it. I'm like, okay, you go for it. Like
Perfect.
she's starting early because she's like, I want to be multimillionaire, like I'm not gonna wait for this. so
Yeah,
so I think we have also a generation that are coming up that are really thinking about how to potentially even retire early, right? That they're
sure.
thinking completely different than maybe our generation or our parents' generation, where we work till, you know, 65 or whatever. So it's really
I
interesting.
Yeah, I talk to clients about that a lot too.
Yeah.
So it's like we're in a completely different landscape than what
Mhm.
are the baby boomer generation and even their parents
Yeah.
retired in.
Yep.
Because it used to be like you work somewhere for 30 years and then you retire with a pension and a gold watch and you live a
Yep.
happy life for the rest of your life.
Right.
And the industry has kind of shifted away from I mean, I could talk about this specifically for on end, but
Yeah,
in the simple terms, um, the industry has moved away from, I would say, defined benefit plans where
sure.
it, like you have a set amount of money as a pension that you're going to receive,
Right,
but the company takes the risk for that, and they're saying, hey, I'll pay you X amount because you saved X amount throughout your career, and
right,
it's a steady benefit. And they've shifted a lot more towards defined contribution plans where it puts the responsibility on the individual to save.
right.
So
Mm,
they provide the platform, but like you're not forced to do it.
right.
um, so that's what I was going to say. I do work with a lot of individuals, but also from a company standpoint, the planning is important because the structure of the plan can be different for different types of companies, like how it coordinates and incentivizes employees to
Yeah,
save is important. And then also from a retention standpoint in this environment, that you want your benefits to be competitive in the industry because people are interested in that.
yeah,
Um, and it can help you stand out within the industry if you're trying to acquire high value talent, because they're
right,
going to say, well, I want to go here because the benefits are fantastic.
right,
And there's an advisor that can help me with all this stuff. So it's
right.
um, from the CFO, CEOs, and other organizations that I've worked with a lot, the ones that are involved the most with me see the best results, I would say,
Yeah.
versus just saying, yeah, we have a 401k plan. Here's your enrollment package. Figure it out.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, isn't that true of, anybody, any client who, fully utilizes the services of a professional, they're going to get the best benefits by having a relationship and working with them. So, I love that you mentioned that. I think it's so important. I have another video and, I can link that as well on Secure Act and how that is affecting folks with retirement plans and things like that. But I'll link that below for anybody who's interested in learning about some of the regulations that are starting to come out and in support of what Paychex is calling a retirement like catastrophe. It's like really getting down to um the point where not enough people are saving. And so the Secure Act is something that's supposed to really help small businesses support their employees by giving them that vehicle to do that retirement planning in. So I'm glad you mentioned that because it's so important and it's a really hot topic if you start talking to a lot of HR professionals.
Yeah.
And
And I can say that too, because a lot of times the whoever is in charge on the group level, whether it's like HR or the treasurer or the CFO or whoever is in charge of the benefits, they want to be involved and they just want to make sure the platform is set up appropriately, but they just want their employees to be successful and happy and safe for retirement. However, they're not necessarily the best person to answer questions about financial planning, and they
absolutely,
usually get inundated with all the questions. So
absolutely. Yeah.
I usually tell everybody it's like having that relationship is fantastic because really those questions should be redirected to someone like me to coordinate with the plan.
Mhm.
And but from an employer standpoint, we can be a huge weight off your shoulders
Yeah.
because if you have a good contact phone number, email, meetings available, um, whenever someone pops in the office or fires off an email that's like, hey, I got questions about XYZ, you can just be
Right.
like, Robert, call Robert,
Right.
schedule a meeting, they can help. And because they have so much stuff on their plate and they have a lot to do throughout the day. So like everything added on top of that, it
Right.
just makes their life more stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not the place, right, of the HR team. It's really the places for them is compliance and trying to make sure that everything is kind of flowing through well.
Yeah.
It's really important to have, that financial advisor willing and able to jump in whenever needed with those specific questions. So yeah,
We could
it's
talk about that forever.
forever.
And you guys do the same thing. That's what I was going to say. There's a lot of synergy between what you guys do and what I do because, like, you guys set the foundation and do a lot of stuff for companies and organizations. But again, even with you guys, it's like there's certain questions that comes my way where I'm like, hey, this is a CPA question.
Same.
And then vice versa. It's like, this isn't a CPA question. This is a strategy, like investment question.
Yeah.
And having a good team in place to cover all of those is extremely important.
Right.
And it's one of those things that you feel like, oh, we'll be okay without it until you don't have it. And then you're
Right.
like, oh my God, we should have done this differently.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so true. Um, okay, so I'm gonna pull up our slides really quickly so that we can share. I'm gonna exit my full screen because we have some visuals that are important. All right, so Robert, let's jump into kind of the first things that you thought was really important, although you've shared some amazing things already. Let's talk about how a financial planner gets paid, because I know that's
Sure.
always a question. People are always unsure, and it kind of is a fear factor. So how do we really help with that fear factor?
Yeah, I tried to narrow this down to three. I mean, like I said from the beginning, I could talk about like 50 million different things, but I thought this was important for number one because it just seems ambiguous sometimes
Yeah,
of how, and then a lot of people have no idea how stuff flows through. So the first thing I would preface when you talk about how we get paid, I will say there's no free lunch in the financial industry. So I say that first because there's a lot of companies and organizations and different structures where people will be like, oh, well, that's free. I don't pay anything. And that's not necessarily true. So if there's compensation and there's some sort of fee structure built into every possible model.
right,
So if you think it's free, it just means it's coming out somewhere else. So like if you have a free account and you're using a retail type of brokerage account or something like that, the platform may be free, but the spread on what you're paying for the individual investments is probably altered because every company can't operate for free.
no,
So I would say there's always some sort of structure, and it comes out in the wash. It just depends on how you want to pay it. So these are the three top ones. So I would say the first one is fee based. The industry has kind of shifted and is, I would say, more towards that now, just because this is where you see most of the fiduciary responsibility kick in for these accounts. So fee-based means typically it's assets under management. So if you have a client that has X amount of dollars in their account, then you have an agreed upon fee structure that's based on the assets that are in that account. So you're not paying out of pocket and you're not paying for anything ancillary. I would say all of it is well known, it's documented, it's on your statements for transparency, and you see exactly what you're paying. So let's say, I'm just making up a number, but let's say you had $1 million in your account
sure,
and the fee's 1%, it's $10,000 for over the course of the year. And typically that's deducted on a monthly basis. But in the fee-based relationship, again, that's where you see more of the fiduciary responsibilities because we sit on the same side of the table as the client. So if you have $1 million in your account, we don't want your account to go down because like that means we get less money as
right,
well. So we're sharing in the performance of your
risk.
account.
Yeah,
Yeah. And we want your account to do well because it means we're getting paid more too. And you guys are happy, we're happy. It just puts us in a very parallel universe of like we all have the same objectives. And it's very transparent because you see what the cost is. And typically in a fee-based arrangement, you don't have any trading costs and you typically aren't buying any sort of like loaded mutual funds or anything like that. It's an all-in fee. So it's just very clean, easy. You see what it is, you know what you're paying, and you have an advisor that's typically on the same agenda as you are.
gotcha.
Commission based is where it still exists, for sure, but I would say the industry is kind of shifting more towards the fee based side just for transparency and compliance and all sorts of other things.
Mhm.
But the commission side ends up being a little bit more transactional, I would say. Um, we're dual registered, by the way, so meaning we can do all three of these. So that's the other freedom that I was talking about being independent. I go through this with all my clients to say, here's three different ways we could do this. What makes most sense for you? Let me go through the pros and cons of each one of these, and then I'll make a recommendation of I think this is the best for this reason, based on what you're trying to do. So it's not like we're stuck and we have to
Right.
do it one way. And then the fee for service is, I would say, a hybrid, also becoming more popular with the younger generation. Is a lot of younger people are just smart. Technology is available, websites are better, information is more readily available.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of clients that are like do it yourselfers, and which is completely fine, but they end up coming back to me saying, hey, I want to do this on my own, but I at least want to be pointed in the right direction. Like
Sure.
I want to have a sounding board or an experienced person to be like, am I doing this the right way? How should I do it? But then I'll take it from there.
Right.
So the fee for service is exactly that. So we either do like a fee for like a plan, like depending on how long it'll take. The more comprehensive, it'll be a little bit more.
Mhm.
If it's super easy, it'll be a lot less. Um, and then we also have a subscription service that we do, which a lot of people have liked, where it's a 12-month engagement, and then you just pay a monthly fee, and you can use like credit card, debit card, check, whatever. But it's just kind of like a monthly retainer for 12 months to say, I want to do a couple reviews. I want to have someone to reach out to while I'm getting stuff set up. After a year and everything is in place, we'll figure out if I want to keep it or not. And then I
Right.
have some clients that keep it because they are like, I always want to be able to call you and have you involved. Or some people are like, we're good. Thanks for all the help. We're in a great space now. And I'll reach out in the future if we need any help.
I think that's great that you have those options available, because you're right. We are dealing with a very educated world now. They can do, people can do a lot of research on their own. But what I'm finding is that you're right. They're missing things. They don't
Yeah.
know how it really works. Like you can read, it's like reading in college, like it's theory, but once you get into practice, it's well, not completely different, but it's different.
Yeah. And I
So,
would say from the planning side, I hear this all the time where it's like, you just don't know what you don't know.
right.
So from the financial planning side, people look at it and it's stuff that I bring up once you do the comprehensive review that they're like, I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah.
So it could be just the way stuff is structured will save them in taxes,
Yes.
or there's different contributions that they could do that they didn't know about.
Yeah.
There's different like when you're selling property or you're transferring stuff, like there's just so many things
Mm,
that I save clients a lot of value, but
mm.
you like don't see it on paper. It's like not going to show up on your statement at the end of the month where it's
Yeah.
like, hey, this was a great return. But it's like if I saved you thousands of dollars on the way we structured stuff, it's hard to show you that unless we did the plan. And that's what I think a lot of people miss because they're just like, I don't know what I don't know.
Right. Right. Exactly. Thank you for explaining that to us. Now, I know we kind of started jumping into comprehensive planning versus transactional business, and I know that this is an important slide for you. And
I know it's goofy. So
I'm gonna make it
the
a little
yeah, the message is better than the pictures. I'll put it that way.
smaller. Okay. Well, tell us all about this option.
So I came up with this kind of metaphor of, or like kind of analogy between the two, just from my experience. So the story behind this is you have the person going shopping on the left, and then you have the person that's confused on the right. So comprehensive planning, I think of it as we've all been there, where you go to Costco or you go to the grocery store or wherever you go, and you spend like $200, and then you come home and you spent a lot of money, but then it's time for dinner and you're like, I don't even know what to make because like, what did we buy? I know we spent a lot of money, but none of this stuff goes together. Like the protein doesn't go with the side, that doesn't go with this. It's like we just bought a bunch of stuff. So that I would say ends up being more on the transactional side, and it's not bad stuff. I mean, you could have like prime choice fillets in there, but like nothing to go with it. So it's in the same thing for the financial world. It's like you work and you accumulate stuff over time, whether it's like insurance and investments and whatever, group retirement plans. And then you get to the end of time for retirement, and it's like, what do I have? I know it's a lot of good stuff, but like, how does this all work together?
Right.
So the comprehensive planning piece is where, think of the time that you went to the store where you created a list before you went, and you're like, these are all the things that I need. I kind of planned out my menu for the week. I got all the stuff that I need. And then you go to the store, you get everything on the list, and you come home and it works perfectly. We all forget stuff too, even if it's not on the list, but that's for future reviews. That's why it's not a one and done situation. But that's the analogy that I use all the time. Comprehensive planning is reviewing what your needs, wants, and wishes are, what your goals and objectives are for you, spouse, family, kids, grandparents, whatever the family dynamic is or the business dynamic is. And then it's looking what you currently have to say, like, what should we keep, or like, do what we have, it works, or do we need to restructure it a little bit? And then what do we do from here to 5, 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, to make sure that we're on track? And then we benchmark it along the way to make sure you're continually on track, because that changes over time. So that's where I would say that comprehensive planning is significantly different than the transactional side, because it's a process. And I tell clients that all the time too, where don't get overwhelmed, because like we're not going to, we didn't build Rome in a day. So like you're not going to completely solve every financial issue or planning questions or anything all in one meeting.
Sure.
But you start from there, you build the plan, you see what works with the projections and everything that we're going to do, and then you build a punch list of stuff where we're going to start knocking these things out over time.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense when you're talking about putting together a menu and having to, kind of put together dinner. That makes a lot of sense to me. Like, you accumulate all these groceries. Let's like you picked up all these different canned goods and you looked away and somehow these canned goods multiplied.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, what am I going to do with all these beans? So
Yeah.
you have to have a plan for those beans so that it fits into the big picture of what you're trying to make.
That's
And
a good point too, because I see a lot of clients, they'll duplicate stuff. We call it like overlapping in their portfolio.
yeah,
So, and a lot of people think, and this is kind of on the next slide too, but people think, oh, I just have a ton of accounts, so I'm diversified. Like, no,
yeah,
you're not necessarily diversified just because you have a ton of accounts. It just means you have a lot of accounts.
yes,
But you bought the
yeah,
same thing in all 5 different retirement accounts. So you technically are super concentrated in the exact
yeah.
same investment.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the next slide and talk about your planning versus performance and what all of that looks like for.
Yeah. So once the other thing I would touch on too, for the which kind of dovetails into this a little bit, is the planning. Once you've built a plan with us, it's a live system. Like we give you access to it. You can log in and check it whenever you want to, and it has everything in one place. But it's also live, meaning like when we do like we just set it up, like 6 months or 12 months or a quarter from now, when we review it, it's still all there. So like the first time you build the plan, I would say is the hardest. And we try to make it as easy as possible. But reviews, once that's in place, are super easy. Um, so that's part of what I put on here for planning versus performance.
Yeah.
It means people, and so what this picture is supposed to be is like a present or a box. People get so focused on like the prize versus the process. So like everybody wants that new stock or that new investment that's just going to blow everything else away. But I can tell you, chasing that is like chasing a unicorn. It's almost impossible. Experts get it wrong all the time. So we as your advisor want your account to do well. Like if you have an advisor that says, I don't want your investments to do well, like find another person.
Right.
But performance can't be the only thing that you focus on. What I end up seeing is you just focus on the performance of the investments and you forget about all the other stuff. But if you just have a disciplined, repeatable process in place for investment selection and risk management and rebalancing and kind of monitoring what funds or investments or ETF or index funds that you're using, and you just have a process in place for everything, you'll end up attaining the prize a lot better.
I mean, we're talking about the stock market too. I mean, it's an up and down thing. And, you know, the proof of over so many years, you know, you can see the growth, but it isn't always an up year or a down, you know,
it's
it's
not
like
always rosy.
yeah. And that's life too. That's entrepreneurship and business ownership too. So I think it's a great reminder for business owners and individuals in general that you have to really see this as a long-term goal, not like something that's just going to happen overnight for you.
And we build in the pitfalls. So like in our planning for regardless whether it's individual or business, like we plan for stuff not to be perfect all the time. So we run a lot of simulations and projections that incorporate times like 1983 or 1987 or the early 2000s or 2008. Like there's through your work career and through retirement, there's going to be economic cycles that you're going to go through. But it's the process is what gets you through it. So it's making sure you're not trying to time the market perfectly because everybody gets that wrong.
Right.
So but you don't want to be overexposed wildly outside of where your comfort zone is, but you also don't want to be super conservative either and miss the upside.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to tweak the plan though than to not have one. So
Right. Exactly.
then you're already confused about no plan.
Right.
And then all the other variables that you can't control change. So you're like, now I don't even know what to do. But if you have a plan, it's like, all right, well, we got to adjust and pivot the plan.
Right.
But it didn't completely change the overall plan. It's just we got to make some tweaks.
Right. Well, and that's what we saw with our clients too. You know, we already have a way we do business and how we handle things. And, you know, some of our clients we actually handle cash flow management for. And so we had to change how we handled cash flow because things changed. So, you know, it wasn't like you had to, you know, pick up a whole business and move it. It was just
we're not starting from scratch now.
Right, exactly. So it was a lot easier to work with the clients that we already were working with, as opposed to bringing somebody in and trying to, you know, kind of revamp the whole thing right in the middle of the pandemic. We did it with a few clients, but it was definitely a struggle for them. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen for now. And I know we have a few items left to wrap up. And you were nice enough to include this as, you know, common things that clients struggle with. And the first thing you said was unsolicited contact advice.
Yeah. So unsolicited, that's part of everybody. These days, everybody basically is getting information from all over the place, and it's not always from the person that you want to get advice from. So like when you're at the water cooler at work, someone that has no idea your actual financial situation and family stuff, they're like, you should be doing this. Or even a family member, it's like, well, this worked for me back in the 1970s, so obviously it'll work perfectly in 2023. So not saying that you don't get good advice. I always tell clients, bring me all the advice that you hear and let's talk about it.
Well, I love that you had that, and let me fix it. It's unsolicited constant advice, which I think, you know, I have clients that come to me, new potential clients, right? They come to me and they're like, I need to be an S Corp. I'm like, well, why do you need to be an S Corp? Like, well, my cousin told me that I need to be an S Corp because it's going to help me with my taxes and stuff like that. So I'm like, well, okay, let's look at the whole picture first before we decide what's going to be best. And I think,
and that's the thing. It's like an S Corp may make sense, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's jump there first because there's cost involved of administrating an extra entity. You know, it's like there's a lot of things that are not considered. And of course, that unsolicited advice is, they are trying to help, like they want to help, right? But it's not always going to be helpful if it's not going to really meet their needs. And so it happens all the time in our industry too. You're like, oh, I heard I could do this. I'm like, well,
Yeah, and it's not necessarily like good and bad, because I hear that a lot of times too. Because like for your example, it's like I heard you do an S corp, and then like you talk through it, and like maybe you end up doing an S corp because it
yeah,
makes sense, or maybe you don't. But it's
right,
not that the S corp's not bad or good.
right.
It's a
It's just
lot
a
of people
tool.
miss that too. They're like, so you're saying an S corp's bad? I'm like, no, it's just
It's not the right
the
tool.
it's not the right tool for what you're trying to
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
I love your second point here, and it says nobody talks about their losers. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So I put that on there because it was one of those things. Again, it kind of ties into the unsolicited advice, but I think about like let's say you're at a barbecue or whatever you're doing on the weekend. Nobody comes into that barbecue and is like, man, I got crushed in the market. Like no one comes in and is like, I made this decision for my business and it really tanked. Like
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
one's going to talk about that. So the
Right.
only stuff you hear about is the success stories. But I would say the probability of success versus failure is hugely like tilted. So it's I'm not saying the business is success or fail, but it's just in general, you're only going to hear the huge success stories. Like, so if that person in their portfolio like bought Apple, like when it did fantastic,
Right.
he or she probably also owned it when it tanked, and you're never
Yeah.
going to hear about that. So
Right.
just take some of the success stories that you hear with a grain of salt, because it could be one success story with 99 failures.
Right. Absolutely. And that's usually the case, right?
Yeah,
Usually the case. Especially if you're in there trying things and doing different things all the time, you're gonna fail more than you are gonna win in a lot of cases.
exactly.
And as you're trying to figure things out. Well, and you mentioned diversification. And I would imagine that's a pretty important piece of um, you know, having your portfolio be completely balanced.
Yeah.
So
And I put that on there because there's different types of diversification, but like when you look at the portfolio, I see this all the time. So it kind of goes back to some of the previous slides that we were looking at, where it's like you accumulated, oh, I have 4 old 401ks from all the jobs that I've had, and I never
yes,
rolled those over. And then I
yeah,
have my IRA, and I also have a Roth, and then I have this random brokerage account, and then I have this life insurance, and then I have this. So but when you're looking at all the client sees is statements or login stuff on each individual website over
right,
like 5 different places. So they're like, well, I got a lot of stuff. So that probably means I'm diversified. So there's a difference between, I call it record keeping diversification and actual investment diversification. So in order to be truly diversified, you want your overall portfolio to be diversified in multiple different categories of like stocks, bonds, whatever the ratio ends up being that makes sense for you.
right,
But what I end up doing a lot of times is record keeper consolidation. So what I mean by record keeper is whoever the name is on your statement on your 401k, that's just the record keeper. The investments inside of it are completely independent of that. So like just because you have XYZ on this statement, you can have any investments that are available in that plan. So that really doesn't matter. But so I end up doing record keeper consolidation a lot of times because you just have a lot of the same thing, just in a lot of different places. So when you pull it together, you actually have a clearer lens to see kind of what you have, and you actually end up getting more diversification that way versus just a tremendous amount of overlap.
well, Robert, I really appreciate you coming on and explaining all these different things to us about financial planning. How can our viewers get a hold of you?
I can put you can call me, email me anytime, and we can put up the credentials. And then our website is retirement-professionals.com. So I have a team that's there, but all my bio and everything about us is there. And even if you go on the website, we have a lot of useful free information that users can kind of peruse through. And you can actually schedule a meeting directly on my calendar on the website too.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, that's good to know. And we'll put that in the show notes so that everyone will have that information so they can get a hold of you if they have more questions.
And I would say the clock doesn't start right when you call me or ask questions. So like, don't feel like, oh, I don't want to call because I don't want to pay anything. Like most of the time we do complimentary reviews and conversations and all that stuff just to figure out your situation, how we can help, all that stuff. So please feel free to reach out if you have
Right.
any questions.
Right. Well, I mean, I think with any professional company, you're really looking at, right fit and making sure that, you guys can work together really well. And so thank you so much for explaining the consultation part of your business so that folks can feel free to reach out and getting any information and see if they can or would be comfortable working with you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Robert, so much. And thank you, viewers, for stopping by and checking out all this great information from Robert. And we will include the show notes in the bottom part of this video. And if you are not subscribed already, please subscribe. We put this information out. We've been a bit of a hiatus lately, but we're going to be doing this every other week. And so please check out our previous videos. And again, I mentioned the Secure Act video before, which I think is super important for business owners to know about and employees, and you can inform your business bosses. And so we will see you next time. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.